Good evening, Kotonoba. It's a pleasure to be here. I think it was 1992 when I was invited, maybe by you guys down there, to the Alvarado Symposium in Jyväskylä. And there I heard your lecture on animal architecture. 92, could be. Okay, so we have heard each other, but I never had the opportunity to ask Juhani personal questions. Okay, please have a seat. So as you can see, it's not rehearsed. He doesn't know what I'm going to ask. You'll be surprised.
So will you.
If you look back, is there a space of a house, of a building, which when you look back, you could say this is the first space which influenced me, where I felt there's something special in this space. Maybe even before you knew that there's such a thing like architecture. Would you like to talk about this experience?
Yes. That is the farmhouse in which I lived as a young boy during the war years. There were two places which I understood or experienced as spaces. One was the space underneath the entrance veranda, which was so low that only chickens, the dog, the cat, and myself could.
How old were you?
I was between 4 and 7. And the other space, and I have written about this space. Then the second.
Okay, see, I should read your books.
Pardon me?
I should read your books.
Yes, well, then the second one was the attic of the house, which I have realized later that they were my first library. That space was my first library and museum. There were old newspapers which were on the floor with sawdust as heat insulation. There were old objects. There were 2 books of wallpaper patterns. In the war years, when there were no books, journals, nothing. Wallpapers. I studied those. And the third space that I still remember strongly was the close, narrow space between the cowhouse and the sauna. I realized this is a space. And those 3 spatial experiences are strong.
How is this when you are between, how old were you?
I was, as I said, between 4 and 7.
So when you say this is the first time I realized that this is a space, this sounds like looking back. Do you remember, like you're a grown-up looking back? How was the experience then as a young boy? I'm sure you didn't think this is a space.
No, I didn't think. I felt.
Yeah.
I always felt the first moment of being at home in my grandfather's house when I passed that narrow passage between the sauna and the cowhouse. So I understood the message of that narrow space.
You're understanding?
Pardon?
Are you understanding or feeling?
Well, I understood it through my feeling. I understood the welcome.
I'm trying to get you as a boy and not as a thinker.
Yes, I know what you are saying.
Can you try again, please, This must have been a great experience. So what was it, this experience? Small, dark, light, smelly?
The first one, the space underneath the veranda, that was small. Then the attic was almost immense, or in size. And the other one, again, the space between the sauna and the cowhouse, that was intimate and welcoming, and a kind of a portal that marked. I use these. I realize that these words are afterthoughts, but
sure.
the experiences are real.
It's original.
Yes.
So I torture you once more. So the original experience gave you what feeling as a boy? Sense of home?
They were feelings. Mm-hmm. They were feelings. Of course, everything very much related with the experience of home and the how would I say, the size of the home, because the home perhaps initially was just the interior, but then it gradually expanded. Even the village nearby, not nearby, 4 kilometers away, later felt like home. And then I understood in my childhood that beyond the forest line there is the world. I never realized, of course, that I would travel now 104 times around that world.
Okay, so where do you think is your home now? Do you still have a home?
Yes, I do have home. The home becomes increasingly condensed to these initial experiences.
Maybe this is an indiscreet question. How does your home look and feel? You don't have to answer if you don't want, right?
Well, no. I can answer. You probably know the theologian Teilhard de Chardin.
I do.
Yes. He has, in his books, he speaks of a magical point which he calls omega. And he defines omega as the point from which the world looks whole, looks complete and right. For me, that's what home is.
This was the definition of home, but I asked you something else. Do you know what I you said you're an intellectual, but I catch you.
Yes. All right.
I asked you how concretely your home is. That's why I say you don't have to. If you say that's a private thing, I'm not going to talk about it, fine. But material, is it? What is it? What your home? What do you like in your home?
Well, on one hand, home is a specific place, but for people like you and myself who have traveled so much, it becomes also something non-material. In a way, you carry your home, the idea of home, with you. Yeah. For instance, whenever I enter a new hotel room, I throw certain objects on the bed, declaring it my home for the time being. It's the process of domestication that you...
Well, okay, you stay an intellectual for the rest of your life, that's clear.
All right.
You are not going to answer my question, I can see this. Yeah.
Why don't you answer it on
I will,
your
I will,
yeah.
Okay. I like to sit in a space and have a wall in my back. So that's what I built for myself. For the second time, I like this. I think this is a fantastic feeling. I'm sitting here and I'm protected in the back. And then in the front, I would like to look at the sea, but I don't have it. I would like to look at the fantastic mountains, but this I don't have. I'm too low. I'm living too low. But what I now have is a garden. And this garden is pure luxury to me. It makes me quiet. I have to tell you, I know nothing about plants, unfortunately, but just to be with these plants in front of me, protected, and then some kind of music there, and when I sit there, to the left, I go 3 steps up, the kitchen, okay? And to my right, I go 2 shallow steps up, to a place called the Stube. The Stube. So you see, I'm in the middle of, I'm here, I'm working here, kitchen there, Stube there. Kitchen, big window, sink and so on, corner bench. Extremely important for me. A corner bench where my family can come. I think this is the greatest institution. Now I'm triggering you. Okay, I say one more thing. Stube has to be in wood and needs a fireplace. Okay, this was not a, now as you see this, maybe it was a misunderstanding. It's not a definition, it's how it is. How is it? Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, well, in the house of my youth, there was also a corner bench.
We're from the same family.
The corner bench was next to the exterior door, and that was where anyone entering was supposed to sit for 20 minutes quiet. He would first take off his fur hat, but then sit quiet.
That's a Finnish custom to be quiet, yes. Right?
And then after that 20 minutes, he would explain why he entered.
Europe. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything was also wood. I still remember the wood table made of huge tree trunk.
No.
Yes. So our childhood homes have some common elements, it seems.
Question. Could it be that we all come from houses? All of us?
From
houses?
I don't suppose so. Most of the
Do you think they
young
grew up
people
in the forest?
come from apartments, which is a...
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, we all come from, how would you call it, spaces or
yes.
Family homes or a place where we grow up?
Yes, but for me, house is something that...
for me too.
Yes.
So these early experiences, do they influence your work of today and in the last decades?
Well, yes, they do. They do, and increasingly so.
Oh, why increase? That's interesting.
Yes,
why
because
increasingly
there
so?
were maybe 20 years after I entered the architecture school when I was trying to get away from that mental home. But after that, I have become increasingly inclined to return back to that
mental home.
Mental home.
Oh, that's interesting. What can you say a few words about this mental home?
Well,
for
exactly
you?
the kind of personal, archetypal feeling of being home and the place of home,
yeah.
which is much more a mental thing than a physical thing. And in that sense, we as I said, we carry our home with us somehow, the idea of the home and the experience of that.
So here's a question for you, following to this idea. We look at something, we experience architecture or art or anything, let's stick to architecture. And all we feel about what we see is within us. Okay. Within the beholder, as they say. Clear. We see, you see, everybody sees, and we see different things or whatever. Is there something in the thing himself, immanent? Or is it only these things are dead, architecture is dead, only when we look at it, it becomes something? Is this what you just said, or would you change this?
You are now coming to John Dewey's idea of experience. Of course,
Who was that? No,
our common friend,
we have to talk.
John Dewey.
Jean-Louis? Okay, doesn't matter.
Yes.
Okay, go on. You will tell me later who that was. Yeah, okay.
No, it is constituted in the experience. It's a mental thing. It's something that is between the space and your mind and your memory and your expectations.
So could you, maybe this is too imposing, but could you say, I think, because you say like it is. If you say it is, I would have to say, no, I don't believe like that. But like this, so you say, together with many others, it's in us, it's in you. There's nothing in the object itself.
Yes, it's between the object and me.
No.
Like our mutual interest atmosphere, it's something that's suspended between the space and the experience.
No. I try once more. I would like to. a work of architecture, a building. Can the building have a presence without any human being looking at it? Now I got you. This is my question. Or this has no presence at all, and I look at it and now it has a presence. What do you think?
Well, your question is a very theoretical question. You don't like that notion, but I don't think it has a presence because the presence is a human value, a human experience that constitutes that value.
Okay.
Do you disagree with me?
I would like to disagree with you.
You would like to?
Yeah.
Please do so.
Because I'm not so sure about it. So what I know about this, what I think I know, not from books, from me, from myself, there must be a special quality in the building which makes me feel like that. So there is something there, and this I can see because many buildings don't do this for me. And it doesn't help if anybody tells me they should. If they don't, they don't. I'm not like everybody is like that, I guess. But there are these buildings doing this, and I start to react. I experience beauty or a sense of home, so there must be something there, even if I'm not looking. But I'm not sure. That's why I say I would like to disagree with you, but I can't.
Yeah, well, I follow your thought. A piece of architecture or art that speaks to me needs to have specific characteristics or qualities built into it in order to evoke my interest in the first place, and particularly my admiration and emotions, and perhaps a strong identification in the final end, so that in the most rare cases I have a tear in my eye.
Yeah, so it has to speak to you. A good work of art, a good building has to speak to you.
Yes, it is a dialogue. It's a kind of a dialogue between the observer and the work.
So for a dialogue needs two, right?
It needs two.
One is alive, the other one is dead. Okay, now I stop. Okay. I think for me, I often ask myself, of course, I think it's your half an hour. I ask you. Do you know, have you experienced moments of presence? Does the word presence say anything? Is this important? Say anything to you? Presence?
Yes, it's very important. It's very important. People have presence. Ideas have presence. Beauty, the experience of beauty has presence. Works of architecture and art, they have a presence, and the presence is a very essential thing, which doesn't at all depend on the apparent sort of power of the work. For me, some of the works that are most present are Morandi's paintings, which
really?
I know you also like. And they have an extraordinary presence in this size.
And in this case of Morandis, what makes the presence there for you? How could you explain this?
Well, I would say they are not pictures of something. They are worlds. Morandi has a beautiful sentence. He says, the most abstract of all is reality.
So the most abstract is the most abstract is the most concrete.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Oh, okay, I
Which
understand.
sounds like a paradox, but it is a very interesting view into what reality and abstraction are, and what yes, a very essential thing.
I never understood actually what this is abstraction because of that.
Yeah.
Because if I start to think about abstraction, it becomes incredibly concrete. Then I ask my friend, the philosopher, and it gets even more complicated. Then I stop. They seem to belong together, these two things. For me, I don't know more, but I agree completely with what you say. So the work of art, Morandi, represents a world depth. And you read this as a human being with everything you know and everything you have experienced.
Yes, because a great piece of art is an invitation. It invites your emotions, your understanding, your experiences. And a little piece of Morandi, it becomes a world. And this reminds me of what Tarkovsky in his Sculpting in Time says, an artistic image is not an idea of the artist, it is a world. It's an entire world as reflected in a drop of water.
No, nice.
That's what also Morandi's pieces are.
To you, what they were.
Me, yes, and I would guess that they are for anyone who appreciates them.
Who knows? For you, they are.
Yeah.
For you, they are. That's the important part, I guess. So, how is this? Do you think this kind of feelings, or we go back to this feeling for looking at work of art, also mostly in architecture, has something to do with the past, with the history, with the things which happened before, right now? Shall I ask again? Do you think this feeling, this is a piece of art This, I have tears in my eyes, profound feelings. Is this in the present only, or has it to do with your past?
Well, all memorable pieces of art, for me, they have a depth, a historical depth.
Historical depth.
Yes, of their own in the human culture, but they also evoke the history in your own character, your
biographical.
Own memories. Biographical, yes.
No. I agree. But doesn't matter whether I agree or not. I didn't want to say this. What I want. I would like to go to architecture and ask you from there, what's your relationship as an architect to the history of architecture, to old buildings?
It has changed, I can tell you.
Have you been brought up in modernistic tradition?
Yes, I was brought up in that tradition. I had a very good history teacher, but in the late 50s and 60s, we did not care for history. I have learned to care later, and now history is very important for me because wisdom is something which must be layered. There is very little ad hoc, wisdom. It always has a temporal depth, and that one can experience and read in old things.
Sure.
And I have become also a believer in the wisdom of tradition, which I neglected, and my generation, or 2 or 3 generations of modernists neglected.
Question. In my case, I was also trained in modernist tradition. We always had to invent. Innovation was the top goal of every design.
Yes.
You could not use it, it was completely impossible, but it was innovative. Then you were close to a good grade, right? This was how it was. Today, but now if you do your personal answer, designing today, we're not modernists anymore, we live in a different time, but you have to do a new building. How could we integrate a feeling for the past in a new building? Can you talk about that?
I didn't quite understand that. Can you repeat?
I try to rephrase it. We didn't look at the history at the time, okay? Maybe today, or you do,
Yes.
You said, as a designer, how should you deal with the past of the discipline?
Yes. Well, I used to think in the modernist way that art and architecture were primarily invention. I don't think so anymore. I think they are a conversation with the past much more than a futuristic interest.
Okay.
And after having learned that through my personal experience, my important teachers have become artists and architects who have maybe died 100 years or 500 years ago. And that's the fantastic quality of the human culture and art, is that you can, deal with phenomena that is 100 years old, or even 25,000 years old, like the cave paintings. And they are so real as anything, our conversation right here now.
Right.
That's the magic of art.
Yeah, I agree. We're not the first ones.
No. I hope we are not the last ones either.
Let's see. We can work on that. So, is there a work of architecture which comes to your mind, which tries to do this, and where you think, I can see this in a good or whatever way, that the work of architecture tries, how do you say, to dialogue with the past?
Well, I would say, instead of giving examples, I would say that, in my understanding, every profound architect or artist deals with the past and the tradition, the thick time of the past,
Yeah.
because that's the source of wisdom and meaning also. Meaning is not something that can be invented, it has to be rediscovered. It's in the human being and its historicity, where meaning is.
Oh, I understand.
So I can say that in my personal case, I have changed my views 100% since my youth.
You included the past tradition of art and architecture and so into your work and thinking.
Not only that, into my consciousness or feeling of the world. It's not today, it's a thick presence of things.
Okay. And presence, you said, huh? Good.
I used your word.
You didn't steal it, we know it from a long time. I love the word. So it's this presence. And how does it feel to live with this presence?
Well, the world of art, including architecture, is a magical thing, because you can momentarily feel through, the sensitivity of Vermeer, for instance. When you really look at the painting in a museum like a Vermeer in Delft, when you concentrate on it, you feel first that you are looking at the painting like the view of Delft with the yellow spot that Proust comments on. You feel that you are looking behind the painter, but then 5 minutes later you become Vermeer.
Or Vermeer looks at you.
That's also the case, yes. And this is the power, the magic of the work.
So since it is half hour, this goes so quickly, we could go on, even though we don't have a fire here in the back, a fireplace. There's one question of many here I didn't ask, right? That one thing before we change the roles, I would like to ask. Now he is preparing a dangerous list here. Okay. Okay, my last question to you. Is it true? I have the feeling that you often use metaphors to describe qualities of architecture. Is this true? Do I have the correct impression that you use metaphors sometimes?
Yeah, yes. We communicate through language, and words are metaphorical already. They are from a different ground and built spaces.
I would know some poets who would completely disagree with you, but I know what you're saying. Okay.
Well, I'm not using metaphors for any other purpose than trying to concretize an experience or a feeling, to give it a verbal, communicable shape.
So they are important to you to communicate?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So
Thank you. I need a sauna after this.
now comes the easy part for you.
Yes, we have known each other 23 years, I think. This is not the first time we talk to each other, but this is an unrehearsed, how would I say, planned conversation anyway. The first time I heard a lecture from you was at the Alvarado Symposium in Jyväskylä
Right.
in '95. And I remember your lecture particularly because it did not have any of the characteristics of a normal architect's talk.
Like tonight.
You spoke about little situational observations or experiences of light and space and intimacy and so forth, which was curious to me. Nowadays, 23 years after, I understand very well your approach. But for instance, you might have spoken of a specific light in a specific situation. And my question is, this seems as if you would ground your architectural thinking on situations rather than geometric or entities or ideas of that sort. This reminds me of my professor Aulis Blomstedt in the early 60s. Often in his lectures he said it is more, for an architect, a more important area of talent is to imagine human situations than fantasize spaces. So did your talk, the whole essence of it, focus on such elements of human situations rather than architecture as a pre-given idea?
Okay. Now first I have to ask you, could you make out of this you said, which I understood well, but it's so many things, could you just select one simple question for me? Just one. I understand the complexity of what you're talking, but for me it would be easier if you pick something easy for me, okay?
Is your architectural thinking grounded on specific human situations?
What I do in architecture comes first, and my thinking about architecture comes second. First, I'm a maker. I like to do things, and then I like to listen to what the people want. I like to understand it and also like to question it with them together. And the same thing with the place. I look, what is the place? What does it demand from me? Do I like it? And so on. And my approach is not thinking, designing. My approach is studying the task and then design.
I have visited your office in Hallestein only once. But when I did that, I paid attention to your models, which were placed on your eye height, and they were very realistic models, almost like stage sets with human beings, furniture, and everything, as if you were casting a human situation, casting a theater piece rather than a dead space. So could you say something? Why do you work that way?
I'm extremely interested to create spaces which work well and are full of atmosphere, which people would say, this is a good garage, or this is a good movie theater, or this is a beautiful kitchen. So that's if somebody says this is the best compliment I can get. So that's all I do actually. You saw this correctly. Trying to imagine how will it be. Will I like it? Will everything be tuned? So in German we would say, stimmt es, ist es stimmungsvoll, etc., etc. Nice words in German for this. So you're right, this is what I do, and I have to do the models for two reasons. First of all, my young collaborators hardly draw anymore. These are on the machine, and the machine doesn't have a scale, as we know. So for there, I introduced the models to have to reintroduce the scale into the work. And the other thing is that my imagination of space is not so bad, but I see much more in the model. Much more, because there's so many things.
Well, I'm specifically interested in the realism of your models, and because the more normal, architectural, the method of architect working would be going towards abstraction, but whereas you seem to hold on to the reality of things. And you also, in one of your, in the lecture, it's in the Atmospheres book, one of the subtitles is The Magic of the Real. Can you talk something about the magic of the real?
Yeah. I think for me, there's nothing better than sitting in the kitchen on the corner bench and the light is right and I hear the birds and I can make a coffee and my children come in and so on. And I can of course, transform to churches and other things we're trying to do. I try to find the name atmosphere, which sort of tries to encompass the whole thing, which is not only the forms, as you know, but it's the substance of the materials, it's the togetherness of the materials, how the light falls onto the materials and is reflected in the space, and the sound and all of these things. So that's my passion. But what was the question at the beginning? I lost it.
It was about the magic of the real.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think, wood, stone, concrete, and all these, stone, 5,000 types of stone, and treating stone and putting the stone into the light here or there and so on. So I think I'm completely fascinated when I'm in this National Romantic Hotel here. I can see this architect. I would have, what's his name? You know this guy? I would have liked to meet him because I'm sure he was interested in the same things. You have these dark rooms, you come in, everything is paneled, and then you go somewhere else. That's my world. That's the magic of the real. The architectural space is a void, but everything around I can influence.
Yes, Alberto Giacometti, your countryman, has a beautiful sentence when he says that the task of the artist is not to imitate reality, but to create a reality of the same intensity. I think I like that idea very much. How would you react to this idea?
I like it very much too. That's the essence, isn't it? That's what we all should be trying to do. Yeah.
Did you ever meet Giacometti, by the way?
He died. I'm from Basel, so he was where I live now. That's where he grew up, and he died in Chur a year before I arrived there. So I never met him.
He has become one of the great heroes for me. A really genuine human being, I must say. I can understand.
Yeah. But you know, every evening he was going out from bar to bar. So you know that part also?
Yes.
You like that also? Okay.
Yes. Yes. Well, in your book, Atmospheres, I think you argue or say that you don't begin your work or base your work on any theoretical ground, but then you say also that you like to think about what architecture is and what it means to you. Can you elaborate this,
gladly.
Duality?
Yeah. If I have to do something, I think everybody knows this. My emotions and my intuition helps me more. Because obviously my intuition knows a lot, my brain doesn't know. My intuition is somewhere in the body, like yours and everybody else's, knows a lot. And so I like to trust this and go there and see what comes up. I go to the site or I do something, I have images come up, everybody knows this. So I'm very careful also with my young collaborators coming from the university that they have to stop this rationalization. They cannot say this anymore. They just have to emotionally react. And it's interesting that if you're allowed to have an emotional reaction to a form or to a solution we're working on or to something, they don't like it, love it, but I don't know why, and that's it. Then I like to start to think about this. Why the heck do I love this? And then I start to use my brain. And my observation is if it's the other way around, that first my brain starts, I cannot resource to my emotions anymore. My brain is like the big boss up there and telling this and this and this. I remember the worst designs in school, in art school for furniture and so on I made were the ones I made the biggest research. The research killed it all.
Yes. Well, you begin your Atmospheres book with an image of the Isle of Death.
Right.
The famous painting.
Berkeley in die Toteninsel.
Yes, in Basel Museum.
No, right.
Yes, and you ended with another painting, Antonello da Messina's, beautiful Annunciation.
Right.
Lady in a blue.
Right.
Somewhat lighter blue than you have now.
Okay.
What is your relationship with painting? Because it's very rare to begin and end an architecture book or personal book on paintings.
Maybe first I have to say that learning about architecture, in my case, for me, was always learning outside of architecture. Maybe that's quite similar to you. So I learned from music, or I learned from painting, or I learned from art. Böcklins Toteninsel is like an icon. So there is a house, and there are the cypresses and the island,
and the blackness in the center.
And the black is in the center, and there is this light, and so. And I have to say, I like this if there is a composition of something, which we call this in German Stillleben, and in English, how is it called? The still life?
Still life.
Okay. So I like this Stillleben kind of thing, when things come together. I like to make pieces of architecture which have the same quality of being, look at this, and now this is clear and strong. So, and in Böcklins Totendienst, apart from other things, of course, I can see this, okay?
Isn't also the island itself almost like a Morandi painting? It's a still life, which expresses the Isle of
so
Death.
I can see you like it too, right? With your Morandi background. I can see
I
that.
also like the Antonello da Messina painting.
Why do you like that painting?
Well, the woman is just fantastically beautiful.
Isn't she?
Yes.
I agree
not in an erotic sense, but something, something other. But I also think of another Antonello da Messina painting, Hieronymus in his study, which is an archetypal image of architecture. And you speak of intimacy. One of the sub-chapters in your book, Atmospheres, is on intimacy.
Right.
Could you speak on intimacy in architecture?
I didn't answer the question about why is this the blue Annunziata in the book. You want to hear it? I'm going to tell you.
Yes, I thought you wanted to escape it.
No. Very considerate of you. Okay. When I saw this painting for the first time, I've never seen it in real. I haven't been down in the south. I still want to do this, just as a photo, as a reproduction. I was stricken by this amazing beauty and by this a woman that you exactly like you, who she is not erotic. She's somehow more than this. It's I could compare it maybe that there's the composer Bach who can translate words into music, and then I say, yes, exactly. God damn it, how can this guy do this? That is it. The hair is voll bekümmernis, and the music says exactly this. And there I have a strong feeling, and maybe it has also to do with. I hate to say it, but we should always say the truth, so I say it. I think it has to do with the figure of a mother. Somebody who looks for me and is beautiful. Something like that.
Yes, the blue color itself is memorable. And so are the motions of the hand, two hands. Enigmatic somehow.
And I put it there, of course, as my personal image of beauty.
In the same book, you have pictures of architecture. One is a railway station by Pope.
Yeah, right.
And then there's an image of a student cafe in Zurich.
Yeah, right.
Would you explain or tell us why do you choose rather surprising examples of great architecture?
This black and white image from the Café Odeon in Zurich.
Yes. With smoke, cigarette smoke.
This is, I think, this is sort of young intellectuals and sitting in this famous cafe, talking, but it's not a very good time. World War One has just been, I think, so it's not a very good time. But it's something fantastic that this space and the tables and the chair and these guys there in their clothes and this space and the smoke, which I think a perfect place Café Odeon, I would have liked to be there. Must have been a perfect place. So always my same longing for this something which is like full and rich. Okay? The other thing has to do with history. I was, in America, I had the possibility to buy volumes, big volumes called Lost America. And then I started to look through these things, and you see, and Lost America, all these buildings and all the volumes are lost. And they are so well made. You can see there have been masons working on facades, and there have been windows, incredible, beautiful details. It comes to my mind when I'm here in the hotel in your National Romantic pieces, which in types are really well made. And so this, and then there's also, and there is this railway station, so perfect, gone. So this has to do, I would like to pay a reference to the people, to the craftsmen and the architects who did such beautiful things.
In that same book you have one image of Le Corbusier, the Sarabhai house in Ahmedabad. Would you explain why you selected Le Corbusier? And I'm asking this because a month ago
You were there.
Yes, and I talked with Doshi, Balkrishna Doshi, who's 90 years old, and he worked on the Corbusier projects in Ahmedabad.
It's an intimate space. It's surprisingly low. It works with vaults. It works with colors. It's not big, not really big. It's an intimate space. It has a fantastic depth. It's a reference to Le Corbusier I adore. Of course, I didn't meet him, but whenever I encounter a building of his, I feel something. I feel also for like Palladio buildings. When I go there, I think there was this guy, he knew everything, how it goes and went and how it felt, and now I do this. And I think Corbusier was obsessed also to get this right. And what's fantastic, I show you. My notes here, they are in this book. You know the Cabanon.
Yes.
Okay, I've been there last summer. And what got to me when I touched is he made drawings of this small piece of shack where he was, or hut or so, with the same dedication and precision like for Chandigarh. So I'm a complete fan of Corbusier. And again, there in this image, I saw this amazing quality that it's a haptical, physical presence quality to me. Are we done?
Let me, before we end, let me ask you
we must be
last
done.
question, which deals with your beginning.
Yeah.
You started as an assistant to master cabinet maker. And in your lecture in Jyväskylä at the Alvar Aalto Symposium, you have a little glimpse of your work there, and then you are describing how you built your first pieces of furniture that you had designed yourself.
I forgot about that.
Bed and a cupboard.
Right.
And you describe wonderfully the precision that you were able to achieve in your cupboard. When you describe the tight fit of the door, which closed with a kind of a sound of air.
Right.
Can you tell us what you have gained from your cabinet maker background? I'm asking this particularly because Still in my days, each one of us worked on construction sites. Each one of had a personal relationship with work, but it has disappeared. So would you say something on this?
I was forced to do this. My father wanted this, so I hated it. But looking back, I can see that I learned something in these 4 years. And I learned that I can make objects, and I can give to these objects a very specific quality. That this kind of tight fit where the air hardly can come out, this was a discovery, empiric discovery, like many, many other things later.
Particularly tell of your interest in the undersides, the invisible parts, the quality of the invisible parts.
I don't really know where these things come from. Not from my father, because he was making everything cheap you didn't see. Maybe it was protest to him, but I don't think so. I'm like that, I'm sorry.
Well, you certainly have a sense of quality. I remember when we spent a few days in Jyväskylä in the jury, you had to bring your own cigars because we couldn't find good enough cigars in Finland.
Let's see what comes today. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We decided there would be no questions, but you said I could give one. So please. And since I do feel with the future of Finnish architecture that is sitting out there, we live in a distracted world and it's difficult to focus. What advice would you give? Both of you. Advice to young coming architects.
In my view, architecture has become too professionalistic in orientation. Architects are increasingly working and looking like lawyers and engineers. I think my advice, that is a wrong orientation. Architecture is something else. It's a humanistic and human endeavor. And as I said earlier, our task is to continue a tradition, to make sure that there is not break in the history of human wisdom, I would say. So my advice would be go back to when art and architecture were still, autonomous, not part of the commercial establishment and part of the how would I say, sick competition of visibility in the society. And I always tell my students everywhere, don't ever go to bed without having at least 4 good books next to your head on the night table. Wisdom is in the books, not in the, these devices.
Okay, 4 books. Good advice. So this is, of course, a big question. This would fill the next lecture, next talk. What I see is that in most of the schools of architecture all over the ones I know of, architects are trained to be artists and small geniuses and so on. And when they go back to the field, they encounter a commercial world where you have to perform within the economy and the givens and so on. And this doesn't come together. So we would have to talk about then what's happening in the world, you know? Is it now a few architects who can work like that, like the old artistic, skillful architect, and the rest just are facade planners and floor plan layouters and so on? Okay, I don't know. But I can go back and say, I think it's interesting, it would be good if every architect, I put it like that, architects who come to my office, they should all have worked for 1 year at least with their hands somewhere. I like that if somebody has a competence, whatever, knitting or rebars or something, but doing something, a knowledge of the hand, I believe in this. And the other thing would be, don't believe everything they say, they tell you, the professors. Use your own head, try to be yourself sometimes. But this is dangerous because then I have to don't be conceited, don't be an egotist, and so on. So this is difficult by being yourself. But I mean it. So learn reading, thinking, intelligent of the hand. And then I said this 2 years ago and 3 years ago, and when I read it afterwards in the interview, it always felt somehow wrong. And then last year I told somebody to the same question, I think the architects should all design buildings a good friend of actually what I said is, their mother would like. And now this was written and now the people came back, it was wrong again. So I gave up. You will find out yourself.